Welcome back to the channel, and tonight we're reacting to Tottenham's 2-2 draw away to Bodo Glimt in the Champions League. A game that sparked a lot of debate after amongst the Tottenham fan base. Was it a gritty point earned in tough conditions, or another frustrating performance where we let a win slip through our fingers? We'll be breaking down key moments, discussing Thomas Frank's team selection, questioning the tactical approach, asking whether changes need to be made, including between the sticks. So let's get into it, Jack. We will start with, in general, the split in the fan base. There's a real split in how this 2-2 draw is being received. Some fans see it as a decent point in tricky conditions, a sign of resilience after going 2-0 down. Others think it's another missed opportunity, another underwhelming performance. Where do you personally stand on this? Is this a point gained or 2 points dropped?
I think by the nature of the performance, it's actually a point gained, weirdly, even though I would heavily criticize this performance, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why and team selection, all that stuff. But to answer it simply, Dave, I actually think it's strangely enough a point gained because the performance was that terrible, in my opinion, that the fact that we did salvage a point out of this and didn't end up losing like 4-0 or something like that is, to me, actually quite incredible. So I'll say a point gained.
I'll take the point, don't get me wrong. Get out of jail sort of free card that was tonight, and a point is better than coming away with no points at the end of the day. However, I struggle to really see any positives in it. I think we got the team selection from wrong from the off, which I think then, as soon as that sort of starting 11 was announced, most fans looked at it and goes, oh, this is now turning into much more of a trickier evening than maybe we imagined. Also, we beat this team last year 2-0 out there under a worse manager, less structure in the side. This year we went out there, we found ourselves 2 down. So I don't understand how we can sit there and take positives from it. Also, let's not forget, before people come in with all their positive comments in the chat below, we had a similar game against Rangers, which you brought up to me, behind the scenes in the Europa League last year. Everyone went mad about it, but yet tonight we're sort of praising it. I don't understand it. Also, last year, performances and results like this weren't good enough. Many people, when we ended up winning the Europa League on the run to it, how many people said we played nobodies, it's easy teams, we should be beating them. Now all of a sudden, because we ended up taking a draw away from home against them, now all of a sudden it's a tough environment to go to, it's a difficult place, they're a good team, show some respect, this, that and the other. Look, for me, in general, I just don't think tonight was good enough performance-wise. I don't think it was good enough tactical-wise. I don't think the starting lineup was right. And I just think in general, I think it's 2 points dropped. When you look at the course of how our Champions League draw has been, it's been favourable. All of our big fixtures have been stacked up right at the end of the campaign. This was a golden opportunity for us to take 6 points from 2 games. And I just feel like it's 2 points dropped in my opinion. I'm a bit disappointed with the whole evening overall, especially off the back of the Wolves game. I don't even want to hear the excuse about the pitch tonight. What was the excuse Sunday or Saturday night against Wolves then when we were playing on a grass pitch? The reality is these performances are starting to stack up now, one after another, where we are being lackluster. I think the only bonus is this year we are sort of still getting results. Whereas last year, when we were in situations like this, playing poor, we weren't picking up the results, which I think is probably a positive to take away. But in general, I am one of them where I just sort of want to forget about the night, Jack, and move on to Leeds on the weekend.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, if anything, Spurs should look to try to get as many points as they can before, the tougher fixtures do come around, which is why we were hoping for a win tonight. But yeah, to your point and to the question, I think it's actually pretty amazing that Spurs did somehow salvage a point of some kind. But I am no way am going to be positive or praiseworthy of the performance like you.
You're not sitting out here with your trumpet and your bucket
No,
hat.
I'm not happy clapping over that
Yeah.
performance. I'm happy clapping over the point, but that's more out of just irony and maybe a bit of shithousery.
But I suppose at 2-0 down, you take the point, you get out of there, and you move on. So look, Thomas Frank as well, Jack, made some bold choices with the starting 11, notably leaving out both Xavi Simons and Mo Kudus. Given how flat we looked in attack at times, was that a mistake or justified in the context of fixture congestion? Because before the game, many fans were trying to justify the team selection by pointing to fixture congestion. But I hate to break it to fans, we're only 8 to 10 games into the season.
Yeah, it's maybe once again Thomas Frank perhaps being a little too guilty of just too much rotation, really. I think I would have been all right with leaving out Xavi Simons or Mohamed Kudus. I think especially in Mohamed Kudus's case, like, he's played a lot of minutes. He's probably lined up to play some of the most minutes of anyone this season. So if he didn't want to risk him on a plastic pitch tonight. I would have understood. Xavi Simons could have potentially benefited just by getting more minutes or more opportunities in the midfield, playing as a number 10 in a game like this. He could have still gone with Odebear and with Brennan Johnson, and then just started with or Xavi Simons through the middle. I think he is a little bit guilty of too much rotation for this game, and it ended up sort of haunting us because I think we did actually look a bit better when Xavi Simons and Kudus came on the pitch. We actually seemed to have more possession of the ball, actually, I think, when they came on, if I'm not mistaken. And just quickly as well, I didn't realize this, but I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong here, Dave, but I believe after Leeds United, we have another international break. So, like, did he really need to use this game as an opportunity to rotate players and give guys a rest? I think, like, after the Leeds United game, like, we have an international break. So, I don't know. Maybe it's just too much rotation too soon. Perhaps later down the road, this would be rotation that would probably be necessary and we would just have to come to terms with.
Look, I can understand fans backing and asking for rotation off the back of what happened last year, the amount of injuries we suffered, and at times Postecoglou, there were options for him to rotate, and maybe he didn't do it. Whereas I think tonight is an example of over rotation. For me, there's no excuse to put Johnson and Wilson Odegaard out there. We're 8 to 10 games into the season. We don't need to be relying on these guys at this point with the easy fixtures and the easy opening that we've had to the season. This is where we should be stacking up points, building our confidence, heading into the more harder fixtures that we've got to come. For me, I think tonight is another example of over rotation, like the Wolves game, and I'd argue got it wrong against Brighton as well in terms of his starting selection. And I think he's getting to the point where he's over rotating. I'm starting to question. Is he over rotating, to save legs, or does he just not know his best 11? And I think that's a fair question to ask. Also, I'm not being funny, but what has Johnson or Odegaard done with any of their minutes this season to warrant a start in the
Yeah, to
Champions
earn
League
it.
game tonight?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but we're not a charity. We don't just give minutes for the sake of giving minutes. You got to earn your minutes. What have they done to earn minutes out there in the Champions League game tonight? Now, look, in defence of Thomas Frank, I have no doubt he put that lineup out there believing it was good enough to go and win this game tonight. And I have no doubt he'll be left shocked, scratching his head on the plane on the way home going, what went wrong? I've no doubt about it. But I do think that team selection tonight is his lack of European experience coming back to bite him, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, completely agree.
But also, let's not forget, Jack, did the selected players do enough to justify their inclusion? Because at the end of the day, we can't sit there and defend these guys either. They'd be the very ones knocking on the manager's door looking for minutes.
No, that's where, if anything, a bit of the nerd in me, despite not having a lot of confidence in really either one of them, the nerd in me wanted to see whether Odebear or Brennan Johnson would actually take their chance tonight. If Thomas Frank wanted to rotate, the one positive you would have thought maybe going into this game is like, well, if one of them really takes their chance here, like it gives us that confidence that maybe you can rotate and one of them can fill in, in the winger roles when need be. But I would still say like neither one of them did. Wilson Odebear struggled to do much of anything in the game.
Yeah.
He wasn't really taking on his man that often, which is, I think, a disappointment in my case, because I think that's where we do rate him. He likes to be positive. He likes to take on his fullback. Rarely did that. Made very few runs in behind. Brennan Johnson had a typical Brennan Johnson performance. Like he just didn't really press, didn't really work hard off of the ball, didn't help out his fullback very much in Pedro Porro. When he did have possession, all he did was to look to go backwards or sideways. Never even dared at any point, I think, the entire game to take on his man. And then also the one thing both of them where I think we're really guilty of is none of them made any sort of runs in behind. They're always looking for the ball to feet. In Odebear's case, maybe he gets a slight excuse because like you think when he does get the ball to feet, normally he looks to take on his man. Normally he looks to drive with the ball when he does receive the ball to feet. But he didn't do that this game. So that's why it was really frustrating, actually. I got more mad at him about it because it was like, well, if you're not going to run it behind, then if you do get the ball to your feet, you have to take your man on. Johnson just doesn't make any runs in behind. When he does get the ball to feet, which he seems to want every time, always goes backwards, always goes sideways. It was just Johnson anonymous and then Wilson Odebear, really frustrating. And neither of them are making any case that they're better than the other. And that's really frustrating, actually, to be honest.
100%. And if I'm Thomas Frank, I'm looking at that tonight and I'm calling them in the office tomorrow. I'm guys like, you really let me down. And I'm making sure they know that they've got a lot of hard work ahead of them to get another opportunity. At the end of the day, I suppose that's why I suppose I've got to take into account that to a degree, maybe Thomas Frank's hands is tied with the amount of injuries we're carrying across that front line at the minute. But if I was Thomas Frank, I wouldn't be so quick to rely on these guys again in the future. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, you've made this point. It's not like they're coming in cold. You can't even give them that excuse. They've got plenty of minutes this season to be well warmed up and ready to come in and make an impact in this game. And they just failed. But are we surprised? We're seeing the same results out of them that we seen last season. You
Yeah.
know, I don't know why we go into these games expecting them to be better, expecting to see much else. I think maybe some of it is to do with that. When we hired Thomas Frank, everyone spoke about how much of a great coach he is, how much of a great developer of players he is. And I sort of made the point at the time that, well, how much is it down to Thomas Frank and how much of it is actually down to the same model that they have, like Brighton in terms of their player recruitment and stuff. When you see two clubs with the same model and you look at Brighton's example in terms of it doesn't really matter what manager they got, they're still in an upward trajectory. I think there's an element that, maybe we've over egged how much Thomas Frank develops players and stuff like that. And I think it's been a harsh realization that sometimes it is down to the individual just not being good enough. It doesn't matter how good of a coach you have, how much they work with these guys on the training pitch. They either have it or they don't. And I think we're learning. And to be honest with you, I don't even think it should be a debate. I think they've had more than enough minutes. I include Matisse Tell, Richarlison, and players like that. They've had more than enough opportunities in the Tottenham jersey to show that they're good enough.
Yeah.
And they're just simply not at this point. So there shouldn't even be any debate about it. Come January, come summer, when there's an opportunity to offload these guys, just get them gone and get new guys in because it is just not working. But also, Jack, I do want to talk a little bit about the tactical setup tonight. What did you make of the tactical setup tonight? Especially how much we sort of respected, or we seemed to show Bodo Glimt a lot of respect. Was the game plan too cautious, or was it a necessary approach in an away European tie? Because although we won 2-0 there last year, we did play a bit differently there last year compared to what we
Yeah.
did at home.
I think last year we actually did have more of an attempt to actually have control of the ball, and then I don't think we played nearly as deep last year away from home. I think last year we played a version of like a mid-block type of system where the moment they went into our half, we looked to engage and looked to put pressure on. Whereas this game, the big worry was that we just sat off them and sat off them and sat off them, that they just got deeper and deeper and deeper into our half, pretty much to the point that the center backs were only like 10, 15 yards away from our own box, really,
Yeah.
just passing it around. And while I am a bit of a sicko and I don't mind that approach at times, I always say that if you are going to play that way, when you do get the ball back, you need to have sort of clearly a plan and a strategy to look to get in behind, to look to
Counter.
transition quickly. And the big worry was we didn't look that defensively solid. If you are going to sit back and put every man behind the ball, you then usually limit the opposition to having very few chances. They're really struggling to sort of create or carve anything. That wasn't
Mm,
the case. Like Bodo Glimt were carving through us. They had it pretty easy to create and cut out chances. But then also when we did at times get the ball back, we had no idea what we were doing with it. We just sort of lumped it long. Richarlison was nowhere near it. We didn't have any urgency to go forward, with dynamic sort of transitions or counterattacks. So it was a bit twofold for me where I felt like we struggled to do anything out of possession defensively, and then we struggled to do anything in possession. So I think tactically, honestly, Thomas Frank's worst day. That's where I just feel like I don't mind the guy. I haven't had too much criticism for him thus far, but that's where I felt like this was his worst day at the office because
mm,
I don't really know what we were doing defensively because we didn't really stifle them that much, with that low block. They seemed to
yeah.
find it pretty easy to carve us open. And then in possession, when we did get the ball, didn't look like we had any idea what we were doing either. So that's the big worry signs. We weren't good at either department tonight.
I agree. I think, I'd also add in, I don't think that Thomas Frank set out to be as defensive. I think he
Maybe
sort
not.
of employed his usual sort of mid-block sort of, thing that he likes to employ here at Tottenham Hotspur. I think the problem was twofold. I think we went into the game showing them too much respect. I think they smelt fear and they capitalized on it because of the respect we showed them. I think that it was, in contrast to what we sort of showed them last year. We showed them zero respect last year across both games, and we beat them 5-1 over 2 legs. This year, we showed them a lot more respect, and I think they smelt fear, and it only gave them more confidence and empowered them a lot more to go and try and get something out of this game, because all game, they came forward. They were absolutely relentless. They did not fear us whatsoever, and I think, they only got more confidence off the back of our tactical setup. I would also argue the forward line he picked made it look so much more defensive, because anytime we got the ball forward, none of them could hold it up. It just kept on coming back, which when the ball keeps coming back, you end up sitting as deep as you do. We've heard managers in years gone by, Jose, Conte, I'm not asking them to sit this deep. But when you can't retain possession, you can't hold on to the ball, you end up dropping deeper and deeper and deeper just to sort of, get in and look for half time, basically. And that's what sort of unfolded for the majority of first half. So I think, on a number of ways, I think Thomas Frank got it wrong there.
Yeah.
If you're going to play that low block, you've got to play your players in the forward line that can hold up the ball and get you out.
Yeah.
So I think, for me, I think the problem was rotation and tactical tonight rather than just one or the other, Jack.
No, I completely agree. I think that's where you want to get one of those right, and I don't think he got either right. And I think the bigger worry for me was just how defensively open we looked, because I think I probably would have tolerated us being pretty dreadful going forward if we were also making it really hard on Bodo Glimt to create much of anything, and then it was going to always be like a 0-0 or a 1-0 type of game, and it was just up to whichever team to sort of take whatever half chance falls their way. But Bodo Glimt deserved 3 or 4, if not 5 goals tonight. So that's just the other big worry, is that defensively, arguably the worst performance we've had under Frank.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I fully agree with that. It was absolutely shambolic defensively tonight. I mean, Pedro Porro for both goals, don't even get me started. He got absolutely rinsed by their left winger. But before we even get into, well, actually, no, we'll get into it now, that second goal, Jack. Vicario, look, people will go back to him on that second goal, and they will blame him tonight for Bodo's second goal. At the end of the day, yeah, okay, you would argue there's 3 Spurs players there. Did the ball actually need to go back to Vicario? No. However, it went back, and you're looking for him to deal with it, and it was a poor clearance under no real pressure. It didn't even go that far. It dropped down. It invited the turnover. That's now sort of 3 errors in his last 3 appearances, all of which had either led directly to goals or disrupted our momentum in games. At what point does Thomas Frank have to consider now giving Antonin Kinski a run in the side, even if it's just to take Vicario out of the spotlight for a while?
I just feel like the big worry with me with Vicario is, like, if we are going to play very defensive in games like this, and a big help sometimes can be, like, if you are really low block and you have everyone behind the ball and you're sort of deep inside your own box and in your own half, when you do play it back to the goalkeeper, it's nice when they do have the kicking ability to just sort of get it absolutely cleared and launched, out of your own half. And then you can push forward, give yourself a bit of a reset. Vicario seems to really struggle at that. Like, he doesn't have the technical ability, it looks like, to sort of hit it first time with his left or his right foot and get it really away from the danger area. In fact, he struggles to get it that far away from his own goal. Like, he really does suck at it. And I'm not saying that's the total reason just to bring Kinski in, because shot stopping does play a part, but it's a worry to me, to be honest. Like, I think Vicario puts us under more pressure at times just by struggling to get it away from his own danger area. I think he would help out the team and help out himself a lot more. And then there hasn't been any real, like, the thing with Ange was, I think he benefited from, we were so vulnerable defensively under Ange that it did call for the goalkeeper to make world-class saves, like, on a pretty much a regular basis. And Vicario was able to do that. Under Frank, you wouldn't say, apart from this game, really, like, there hasn't been a lot of times where you would have to call on your goalkeeper to make a world-class save. It's just about the goalkeeper not putting you in any dangerous positions. And Vicario, unfortunately, I feel like has kind of done that. So, yeah, I think, like, Kinski's he's knocking on the door, I would say, right now with Vicario, just by probably being a sure set of hands from set pieces, and also being a guy that, in a way, can probably play better out from the back, which might be more important than we realized, under Frank.
I think previously I probably would have pushed back on this a hell of a lot and said you got to stick with Vicario as number 1. However, one thing, I think many people have sort of, and me included, overlooked some of his flaws because of his shot stopping ability. But when you look, I sort of think I put it down to bad luck against Wolves, but most fans are blaming him. But when you look at that, that's shot stopping to a certain degree. Just making sure you're parrying it into the right areas. You look at the mistake against Brighton, again, that's shot stopping. So then what he's been widely praised for and widely known for, if he's now making errors in that department, plus his kicking isn't great, I think at some point, I think you got to give Kinski the opportunity. And I think you just got to sort of say to Vicario, it's not good enough. I was sort of sitting in bed thinking about this the other night after the Wolves game. When you look at someone like Alisson behind the Liverpool backline, so calm. You never see him erratic, flapping around the place and stuff. And that just breeds confidence into the backline in front of you. You look at Donnarumma, who's now coming at City, another goalkeeper who keeps it calm in behind that back line. Really like him. You look at Arsenal. Many people questioned why are they going after David Raya when they had Ramsdale. But you see the calm and presence that David Raya brings behind that Arsenal back line compared to maybe what Ramsdale has. And I do think it's sort of approaching the point where I think Vicario has to have a big season. If he's going to continue to be number one, he has to have more or less a flawless season between now and the end of the season so that the debate doesn't come around in the summer. Should we do what Arsenal done and go again in the goalkeeper department? But right now, if I'm Thomas Frank, I'm not being funny, but against Leeds, I'm sort of leaning towards putting Anthony Kinski in there because one thing you said in the pre-match or during the watch long, which I agree with, is if we're only going to instruct the goalkeeper to go along with it anyway, well, Kinski's much better at that. He's much more accurate as well, so why not give him the opportunity? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comment section below. And lastly, Jack, going forward, it's a big bugbear of mine. Everything seems to be into feet. No one is making runs in behind, looking to stretch the opposition. And we're not playing those balls up over the top either, which I think it's so much easier to turn the ball over against us. And we're so much more easier to predict in terms of what we're trying to do going forward. Is this a case of players not showing enough energy and intent and maybe just being lazy? Or is it down to Thomas Frank's tactical instructions?
I think it's just similar problems that carried on from the tail end of last season. When we tried to play an attack-minded brand of football last season, we were pretty terrible at it towards the end. I think there was that belief in it initially with Ange's system, but then towards the end, there were similar performances where we just struggled to create much of anything. We struggled to really sort of carve out good chance after good chance. We couldn't take any of our chances. I said as well, it felt like no one was really moving for the ball, showing for the ball, making runs off of the ball, making runs in behind. I think that's carried on into this season. My only worry is that Frank, I think as said in the pre-match buildup, his superpower is, I think, making his teams very difficult to beat, making them very solid defensively, really good shapes as well. The midfield works very hard. They can be very difficult teams to beat, but I've never really felt like his Brentford team was ever doing anything that remarkable or revolutionary going forward. Whereas you could maybe argue the opposite, with Ange. It felt like, maybe there were some question marks about the defense, about the midfield, but going forward, his teams were pretty fun to watch and pretty devastating. So I just feel like the same problem about the forward line is carried on over to Frank. But then is Frank really the guy to fix that, the forward area problems? And is he really going to be the guy to sort of figure out, how to get the most out of them? I'm not so sure. So I think it's a bit of a player issue, mostly a player issue, and then maybe a slight bit of a manager issue with tonight.
I
That's how
agree.
I sort of see it.
I agree. I think one of my big frustrations is you look at Richarlison always going into defeat, Johnson always in defeat, Kudos always in defeat, Simmons always in defeat, Odegaard always wants it in defeat. And basically, even when we're in possession, we're trying to keep 11 men behind the ball. No wonder why we have problems going forward. You've got to be able to mix it up. Good attacking teams can either play in defeat or drop it in behind and players run and spin in behind. I don't see any of that. And to be honest with you, it's a huge problem. It makes us so much more predictable. It makes us so much more easier to defend against because you don't actually ask questions of the defender or even make them ask questions of themselves. And when you do that, sometimes they can get caught in no man's land, and that's where your opportunities present itself. But right now, they're not fearful of anything going in behind. So they know as soon as we get the ball forward, all they have to do is push up behind our players and force them backwards. And it's so easy and predictable. Also, I'm not being funny. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that, we've got the right blend or that. But I don't think Thomas Frank helps himself by continuously rotating that forward line. At some point, he has to put out some sort of consistency on what he thinks is his best forward line. Go with it. Let them build up them combinations. Because I think once you build up the partnerships, you'll start seeing the combinations. You'll start seeing players put balls in behind because they know this guy's going to run and look for it in there and stuff like that. So I think that's a problem. But also, I'll be honest, I don't see anything he's worked on over the course of his time here in terms of going forward. It looks very much like what we done last year. Same thing, looking to create everything out wide all the time and stuff like that. We don't we were told he's a great tactician. We don't see him highlighting any weaknesses in the opposition's defence and looking to go and target it and stuff like that. I think it's just very predictable, very one-dimensional. And Thomas Frank can't survive off that. He is going to have to start coming up with a plan. He is going to have to start working on it, or at least if he is working on it, at least show some resemblance of it on the football pitch. But right now, it looks like when we are in possession, especially when we get that ball into the forward line, we're absolutely clueless. No one knows what to do. No one really knows what the game plan is. And that's why, no matter who's out there, they all look like individuals, because there's no real sort of plan behind what we're trying to do or how we break teams down and stuff like that. It seems like the only thing we've worked on is just direct throw-ins and corner kicks and free kicks into the box. That seems to be it. But what have we done from open play? But look, I'm sure many people get in the comments and it's going to say that's going to take time, which I fully understand, and I can't really push back on that narrative. But look, that's our breakdown from tonight's 2-2 draw with Bodo Glimt. Please give us your thoughts on all the things we've discussed in the comment section below. Look, I'm well aware not everyone's going to see it my way. Probably going to be a lot of people that disagree with me below. But let's be adults. Rather than just come in and say you don't know nothing or anything like this, let me know why you disagree in the comment section below. Also, run them likes up. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs. See you next time, everyone.